I want to thank the committee very much for the great honor of addressing you today. Before I begin, I need to make some disclosures, just in case there's any confusion about it. What I'm going to say is my own personal opinion. It is not the official position of the Arthur Carhart National Wilderness Training Center. I don't think we have an official opinion, do we, except follow the law. Or should anything I say be taken as being blessed by the Bureau of Land Management or the Department of the Interior? A couple of years ago, I was at a dinner with Stuart Brandborg. We heard from Brandy last night, and we were commiserating about the state of the National Wilderness Preservation System and what has happened over the last 50 years. And he said to me, I believe we have heard the last call to dinner. We have one chance left to get this right. I think maybe Brandy's wrong, or let me put it another way. I'm afraid, perhaps, that Brandy is wrong. In Shakespeare's King Henry IV, Part 2, some of you knew I'd quote Shakespeare at some point. Falstaff is commiserating with his old friend Justice Shallow because their life as they knew it is over. Their good friend Prince Hal is about to become King Henry V, and their good times had come to an end. Falstaff turns to Shallow and says, "We have heard the chimes at midnight, Justice Shallow. As I look into the future, I see a wilderness system that is in trouble. In 50 years, will we be here celebrating a 50th anniversary? 100th anniversary? Thank you. I don't know. I don't know if we'll be here in 10 celebrating a 60th. I'm not the only one with this fear. Even 15 years ago, the Pinchot Institute was asked by the Secretaries of Interior and Agriculture to put together a blue ribbon panel to look at the status of the National Wilderness Preservation System and how the agencies were doing managing it. Sometimes known as the Brown Commission, this had some really heavy hitters on it. I mean, we're talking people like Stuart Udall and Deborah Williams and Joseph Sachs. And they said, and here I paraphrase slightly, if the agencies don't get their act together, we are going to lose the National Wilderness Preservation System. Sometimes I worry we might not even make the wilderness system through this weekend. Because I'm afraid that what we're going to do is conflate the importance of the outdoors with the importance of wilderness. And don't get me wrong, the outdoors is extremely important. It's hugely important to get young people into the outdoors. But that is not wilderness. We'll talk about the strides we've made in the conservation of other areas and somehow conflate that with protection of wilderness. And again, don't get me wrong, conservation of other landscapes is extremely important, but they are not wilderness. I'm afraid we are going to lose the distinction that is wilderness. We'll be talking a lot this weekend about isn't wilderness wonderful? And yeah, wilderness is wonderful. And perhaps we will be saying, aren't we wonderful? Because we're taking such good care of it. And I'm afraid that the honest, kind, and short answer to that is no. Are we hearing the chimes at midnight? I'm afraid that the wilderness support system is broken. There are 3 legs to this support system. They are all broken, or breaking, I think. The agencies, the non-governmental organizations, and the public. The federal agencies, let's start with the elephant in the room, or perhaps the elephant that is not in the room. and that is who is here. The Forest Service was limited to 100 participants at this conference. That is one employee for every 4.5 wildernesses managed by that agency. And that seems downright extravagant when you look at what happened to the interior agencies. Originally, we were limited to 75 people. One of the wilderness program leads came up to me and said, my director has told me that I need to come up with a better reason to have 75 people go to Albuquerque than to celebrate a law that was passed in 1964. I was shocked. I mean, really? We need to come up with a better reason to come to Albuquerque than to rededicate ourselves to one of the most important laws ever written? Well, of course, I was wrong. The director was right. And apparently Ed Abbey was wrong when he wrote that wilderness needs no defense, only more defenders. Apparently wilderness does need a defense because the BLM was cut to 37 employees. For those of you who are keeping track at home, that is one employee for every 6 wildernesses that we manage. 20 years ago, at the 30th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, the BLM sent 188 employees to that conference. So what's up with this? I mean, is it the money? I don't think it can be the money. The Park Service was allowed to send the grand total of 33 employees to this conference. If they had sent the full complement of 75, the increase in money to the Park Service would have amounted to approximately 1/3 of 1% of just the annual budget of just Yellowstone National Park. So it can't be the money. We do like to blame GSA, but I looked through our agenda. I don't see any clowns putting together bicycles or whatever it was they did. It's gotten so much. So what's up? Is it that somebody thinks it just looks bad? With that, I have to agree. Our agency participation here does look bad. It looks like we don't like wilderness. Or perhaps more accurately, that we are embarrassed by wilderness. This embarrassment we see all throughout the land, and I believe it is a symptom of the disease that is racking the National Wilderness Preservation System. I want to give you a couple examples. I'm going to be as vague as I can. It's possible that you might identify the decision that I'm talking about, and I'm sorry for that. I'm vague for 2 reasons. First, these are just indicative examples. There are dozens I could cite you, and I don't want to do that. But more importantly, I don't mean to pick on any particular individual or any particular agency. I have not picked examples of bad people sabotaging wilderness. Certainly could have done that. These are decisions made by good people doing what they thought was the best thing at the moment. So let's look at an example. The State Game and Fish Agency comes to an agency, a federal agency, wants to go onto a wilderness and reduce the number of predators so that there will be more prey. Decision point number 1, what does the local manager do? The local manager did not stop this, and I'm going to give the local manager a pass because he, like so many of us, probably believed the old false dichotomy that the states manage the animals and the feds manage the habitat. So he did not stop this. The decision went up the chain, of course. People get more and more aware of such things, and it did not get stopped at any level. Now let's be clear about this. The state wanted to manipulate the earth and its community of life. They wanted to trammel the wilderness by altering their natural predator-prey relationship and make the area less natural. Wildernesses are supposed to be untrammeled and natural, and the agency did not stop this. The wilderness was sacrificed by omission. We did nothing. The decision was, well, we have to think about our options. That's what we'll do. We'll take it under advisement. And if we delay long enough, the state will finish the whole question and will be moot. Wilderness was sacrificed by omission. My other example is a sacrifice by commission. Some more decision points here because the agency actually did something. So, Group X comes into the office, they have Project Y. Project Y involves the use of a tool prohibited by Section 4C of the Wilderness Act. They come to the wilderness manager, say, we want to do this. Decision point number one, what does the wilderness manager say? Well, this is a good wilderness manager. So the wilderness manager says, we'll have to write a minimum requirements analysis and do at least an environmental assessment. So the manager goes to the wilderness specialist, says, please write up a minimum requirements analysis. The wilderness specialist writes up the minimum requirements analysis and determines that the minimum necessary is we will allow the prohibited tool for part of Project Y, but not all of it. Conveys this to the manager goes to Group X, gives the decision, Group X says, no, we insist on the prohibited tool for all of Project Y. Next decision point. What does the manager do? Manager goes to the wilderness specialist and says, redo the minimum requirements analysis to come up with the answer that the Group X wants. Next decision point. What does the wilderness specialist do? It's a good wilderness specialist. The wilderness specialist says, no, I can't do that. Besides, you've already signed the first minimum requirements analysis. Next decision point. What does the manager do? Remember, this is a good manager. There's no censoring of the wilderness specialists, no reprimand, no putting them in the cubicle in the corner. This is a good manager. The manager said, thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. We'll take care of it in the EA and hope we don't get sued. So, the office wrote an environmental assessment and the manager signed a finding of no significant impact for a decision that the agency's own interpretation said was illegal. Now, these two examples I gave you have three things in common. First is this sense of embarrassment on the part of the managers about wilderness restrictions. We're sorry about this. Well, I'm sorry. Wildernesses are supposed to be untrammeled and natural and undeveloped. These are things that are wilderness. The second thing they have in common is that the managers, the ultimate decision makers in this, were either promoted or singled out for praise. Now, I hasten to add that it's not because they threw wilderness under the bus. These are good managers. They were promoted or singled out for praise because they were good managers and they did good work. But the rest of the managers in the agencies see this. They see that there are no consequences to my career if I throw wilderness under the bus. I can throw wilderness under the bus and it will not derail my career. If you don't mind my mixing of transportation metaphors. The third thing they all have in common is that some conservation non-governmental organizations with wilderness interests were complicit in the sacrifice of these wilderness areas. So let's talk about the second broken leg, the NGOs. In the first case, also a sacrifice by omission. Some of the NGOs decided to not engage in the lawsuit that arose over this. We're going to let somebody else do this. This is a change for some of the NGOs from their historic position. In a similar situation, over a lawsuit, I heard one officer from one of these NGOs ask, well, why didn't you participate in this lawsuit on this illegal activity? And his response was, we didn't think it was worth our while. Really? Assuring stewardship of a wilderness area according to the Wilderness Act is not worth your while. Begs the question, what is worth your while? In the second case, also a sacrifice by commission. This NGO urged the agency to approve the alternative that they knew our analysis said was illegal. They urged the approval of an illegal alternative. Why? Except perhaps to keep in good graces with the proponent. We don't want to alienate certain groups out there. This is a symptom of the embarrassment we have over what wilderness is. So embarrassed that one of the NGOs started writing a series of fact sheets for the public. The fact sheets are inaccurate and misleading. And one of the leaders was asked, why are you doing this? He said, well, we want to make wilderness palatable. I'm not sure that the way to get public to support wilderness is by misleading them. Or misleading the agencies, because there are some in our agencies who think if such and such NGO says something, then it must be true. Or if so-and-so's NGO says this, we have no choice but to do that, as if the NGOs set agency policy. But the question arises here is, are the NGOs correct? Do we have to soft sell, to make palatable? Do we have to weaken wilderness for the new public? Let's talk about the new public. A few years ago, there was a proposal in my town, just outside the town of Missoula, to put a ski slope, a ski resort, with slope going up, in ski runs going up to the base of the edge of the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness. The Forest Service had a listening session in which we all gathered around tables like this, and we discussed among ourselves whether we thought this was a good idea or a bad idea. My wife and I were a couple of 60-somethings sitting at a table with 3 30-somethings and a 70-something. And a 70-something was waxing eloquent about the importance of not having ski slopes on the side of Lolo Peak, because Lolo Peak, which is the northeast corner of the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness, this is the beacon for the people of Missoula. They look up there and they know that beyond that is wilderness. Very eloquent, much more than I am or could be. And one of the 30-somethings said, wilderness, that is like so 60s. And in the few years since that, I've been thinking, yes, but which 60s? The 1960s? Or the 2060s? Or the 2160s? Howard Zahniser wrote that the wilderness that has come from us, from the eternity of the past, we have the boldness to project into the eternity of the future. We see and hear a lot about the obsession of the younger generations with extreme sports. But I cannot believe that the new public cannot or will not relate to what is most important about wilderness: solitude, spirituality, healing. The benefits of being in wilderness are great. I do not mean to minimize that. Jesse spoke eloquently to that. Many of you, I'm sure, have in your experience, peak experiences, peak things that happened to you that changed your life when you were in wilderness. I mean, the very first time I met the woman who became my wife, I was standing in the Vistadenas in wilderness. It doesn't get more important than that. But that is only part of what wilderness is. Wildernesses are places that are undeveloped. They are natural. They are untrammeled. To borrow a Buddhist phrase, they're the places of the no self. They are the not us. They are the places, as Sylvia was talking about, for the other species on this planet, or as Henry Beston put it, the other nations who are caught with ourselves in the web of life and time. In the introduction to Marty Murray's autobiography, Terry Tempest Williams quotes Marty as saying, "I hope we shall never be so poor that we shall lose our wilderness areas." I don't think Marty was talking about economically poor. I think she was talking about spiritually poor. I refuse to believe that the new public is so poor that they cannot see their way to give 5% or maybe even 10% to the other nations, to the ultimate places of the no self. So what must we do? There are three things, I think. First, agencies and non-governmental organizations together must not soft pedal wilderness into being palatable, but rather to boldly grow the concept that wilderness is a desirable place, that giving is good. It's not just about what's in it for me. This is a common ethic across the globe. You might have heard it expressed as, it is more blessed to give than to receive. There's going to be a lot of this conference dedicated to getting the new public involved, and I think we should start the dialogue on how to make this happen. The second thing to do is there has to be some self-examination. Do you love wilderness passionately? Or is wilderness kind of a neat thing, part of your duties, a convenient stepping stone throughout your career? At this point, I would like to evoke a paraphrase of an old Irish prayer, which would go something like this. May those that love wilderness continue to love wilderness. And those that do not love wilderness, may the Lord turn their hearts. And if he doesn't turn their hearts, may he turn their ankles so that we may know them by their limping. Okay. No turned ankles. Self-identifying. If you do not love wilderness, the wilderness system at the moment is in such a vulnerable spot that your lack of passion, your embarrassment perhaps, is squeezing the lifeblood out of this precious thing that has been given to us from the eternity of the past. It's okay, not everybody has to love wilderness unless it's part of your job. And if it's part of your job and you don't love wilderness, I don't know, pray for a conversion. Or get that next job. Those of you that love wilderness, you have a much harder job ahead. Starting today, what are you going to do for the National Wilderness Preservation System? Tomorrow we'll be signing the 2020 vision document, which is extremely important. What are we going to be doing for the next 6 years? or 60. But then what? The real hard work comes after that when you go home. 50 years ago, what I was doing was attending a Boy Scout camp called SHIF. It was a national camp. I don't think they have it anymore. It's in New Jersey. It's supposed to grow young leaders, you know. There was a sign over the door that said, when you go home, if you don't make a difference, you haven't been here. And so I say all that to all of you. When you go home, if you don't make a difference, you haven't been here. The only way to do that is through perseverance. And you know what perseverance is, right? Newt Gingrich defined it brilliantly. Perseverance is doing the hard work you do after you get tired of doing the hard work you've already done. But how, you ask? I have no money. There's no budget, so grow your volunteers. It's their wilderness too, you know. Yes, but there's not enough staff. So, donate your life and work longer hours. Yes, but I might burn out that way. A couple of years ago, Rebecca Oreskes came to Missoula to talk about, give a speech at the centennial celebration of the Forest Service. Marvelous speech. She ended with a quotation from the Talmud. You are not expected to finish your job, but neither are you excused from it. So yes, you will burn out. Then you'll be excused, and someone else will have to pick up the torch. You all have to pick it up now. As bicycle racers would say, go hard or go home. But my boss doesn't love wilderness. Love wilderness anyway. But my boss doesn't want me to preserve wilderness character. Preserve wilderness character anyway. Robert Henry wrote, everything depends on those who go on anyway. One last thing. Some of you might be thinking, dude, what's with the oversized tie? Talking about 60s. Oh. Well, this tie belonged to my good friend, Jeff Jarvis. For those of you that never had the opportunity to experience Jeff, I'm sorry for the poverty of your existence. Jeff was a somewhat bigger man than I in a number of ways. He retired as the division chief of the BLM's National Landscape Conservation System, and Jeff died 3 years ago this week, Monday in fact. And I put on the tie not just to honor him, but to remember to tell you something that he frequently said to me at the end of our telephone conversations. In that wry, understated way he had, Jeff would say, Christopher, remember, what we do is rather important. What we do is rather important. I hope that what we are doing is not clanging in the chimes at midnight, but rather let us resolve here to each of us do our part to proudly carry the singing wilderness into the eternity of the future. Thank you much for your attention, and I wish you all well.